diversity resolution, which was kind of like the city like saying, we appreciate this amount of people, these LGBT people, but not really, it's really just a face value. It's like, it's only in word only, not actually protecting LGBT people, but it's just kind of there. And we thought ways that we could improve upon that. Something we will change the statement to actually accurately address the LGBT people and LGBT rights. And the language should include some that advocate for relationships within the LGBT community and with our allies. And elect new allies. Very important. Let's see. We also put that we should ID supporter and organization groups who will benefit from this ordinance. Increase visibility for people who benefit from the NDO. And we asked, what's the message for our legislation? Don't actually ask me because I'm actually still a little bit confused on Mississippi legislation. It's kind of, sometimes we should hold our allies accountable. I think that's actually really important. If you're going to be an ally, I really need you to step up. Mm-hmm. Maybe it might not be tomorrow, it might not be, but I need you to know you're going to stand up at some point. Recruit mainstream religious organizations on board. Oh, my bad. Recruit mainstream religious demographics on board, such as most people who follow under like the Protestant faith, Catholics, Baptists, that sort. Passing out. What's that?
Yeah, we were unclear on that one.
Oh, okay. Inclusion of all communities impacted. Please never forget that there are multiple groups that exist, and even as in gay people, like we have people who have disabilities, people who have. I know a friend who has severe. I'm just gonna let it. I'm not gonna do that, but I'm gonna respect him. A severe mental health issue that it really impacts his way that he reacts within his community, and yeah. Let's see, with widen stakeholders during the draft. I actually
like probably during drafting making sure that there are multiple people and groups who are helping craft your ordinance.
Yes, that. Engage the community of color. Please always remember that, as I said before. we like to be included. When you're passing this ordinance and you're going out into the community to get to become more visible, have a menu of asks for these organizations, especially religious organizations and interest organizations. And there are different levels of engagement. Like one member of our group said, he told us that I really liked it actually. He talked about how sometimes you don't get an immediate support from people, and it's hard to take sometimes, because sometimes you gotta sow a seed, and that seed's not gonna come in the next few weeks. That seed needs to be planted and fostered over a few years, sometimes even a few years, and you might not get exactly what you want from that. And yes, long-term relationship building, that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing your local knowledge. It's very encouraging to see so many people from all across the South thinking strategically about non-discrimination ordinances. So Brad and I are going to talk a little bit about Houston and our next steps, so you can think about your next steps as well. The first one that I'm going to talk about, then I'm going to pass it off, is the community debriefing process. This is a big one because in Houston, for us, losing Hero was a devastating loss for our community. It's really disheartening to look at those numbers and see, wow, there are 180,000 people who voted against my equality. That can be heartbreaking. So our focus in the community debrief was on healing. We really felt it was important to bring people together back in the same room to vent. So we had people, that were heated and people that were being constructed, but we just got it all out there. We let everyone just vent all of their frustrations, and we got it all out in the open so we could start to heal together. So we had people talking about, you know, some criticism of the campaign and what we can do better next time. We also had people talking about immediate next steps. And the most important question that came out in that process for me was the question, well, you know, we're all here right now in Houston as a queer community and we don't have a non-discrimination ordinance. So what can we do right now to ensure that we're still strong and safe as queer people? So that was an amazing question, and some of the conversations that happened out of that were we need a lot of self-care and self-love. We need to support each other and to check in with each other and to create spaces that are safe for us to be ourselves still, even when the citywide isn't maybe, and our workplaces aren't. And the other thing was organizing together around other issues. There are so many other issues that impact queer people. So if we can just still get together and keep building community power, we'll just be stronger for the next fight. So I'm gonna pass it to Brad.
So one of the big things is, and we kind of touched on it in a bunch of the little breakout groups, electing progressive local leaders. In Houston, we lost Hero in November of 2015. That was also a race where we had an open mayor's race and multiple city council races. They all run at the same time. After Hero failed at the ballot, we went to runoff elections. So as much as some of us wanted to climb under rocks and just cry nonstop, we had to immediately shift gears and start wondering who in these runoffs is going to be an ally and who in these runoffs is going to be against us. We already knew, but then we had to mobilize the same people who had been busting their asses, knocking doors for Hero, to go and knock doors for the candidate running for mayor that we knew wouldn't roll back the city's executive orders, which protect LGBT employees and transgender employees. Actually, and transgender Houstonians in any city facility, which is an executive order which a new mayor could just undo. So really trying to make sure that you're getting the progressive local leaders that you need. One way to do that, in Houston we have a lot of organizations. Our GLBT political caucus has been around since 1977. They do endorsement questionnaires for candidates. We gauge where they stand on issues like non-discrimination, so that we can make sure that we are electing the right people and giving money to the right people. So it's really, really a big deal. The culture change canvassing. So at the ACLU in Texas, we had planned on starting a transgender prejudice non-reduction, or reduction, not non-reduction, a transgender prejudice reduction canvas program. And then July of 2015 happened and Hero went to the ballot, so that kind of shot us in the foot of the program that we planned to do. The point of this canvas program is we go door to door, kind of like they did in Maine with marriage, and we knock on doors and we talk about trans folks. We make sure that we're helping people build a really reliable mental template for what a transgender person is. We show them a video of our argument as to why we need to protect trans folks, and we show them an opposition video. And we gauge them through a process that takes anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes at each door. This is really something that they've done successfully in Miami-Dade County. Victoria's nodding her head. They've done it in LA. It kind of came after the loss of Prop 8. The Leadership Lab in Los Angeles developed this Canvas program, tried it out on marriage, shifted it to trans prejudice reduction. They tried it on reproductive rights a little bit. But we've been planning to do this program in Houston because we knew eventually Hero would go to the ballot, and we wanted to start building that foundation so that we could undo the bathroom myth. The entire goal is to inoculate people on this myth. We want to go and we want to give them a shot in the arm that says the bathroom argument is bullshit, so that when they see the commercial on TV, they remember that 30-minute conversation. I was in LA earlier this month to just do it again because I like to go do it when I have a chance. I had a 30-minute conversation with a guy, and it sounds weird when you think about going door to door with people to talk about transgender folks. During our conversation, we were about 15 minutes into the conversation, his cell phone rang. I thought, oh, this is his out, he's gonna say conversation over. He answered the phone and said, I'm in the middle of a really important meeting right now, I'll call you back. Hung the phone up and came back out on the porch with me for another 15 minutes. So it sounds like something that would be a little bit weird, and it's always scary to knock on a stranger's door. But really, when you start engaging folks, I mean, they really start thinking about it, and it helps to build up the idea that trans people are people, and they're not this caricature or stereotype that we always see in these anti-trans ads. So as part of that, we are starting that program now in Texas, in Houston. The good thing about losing is we know everywhere we need to go to knock on doors, because we go where we lost, which is a lot of places. And in addition to that, we started a Transvisible project. So what we've done is to build trans leaders, to give them the skills that they need so that the next time this campaign rolls around, we have people ready to go and work on the campaign and lead the way. We started identifying trans people who are interested in what happened with Hero, who are now starting to get politically involved for the first time, which is pretty tremendous. One of the things that we've done is, part of this Transvisible project is we wanted to basically humanize trans Houstonians. So we started a campaign where we were doing some photographs of trans people in specific Houston locations and identifying, we asked them, what are 3 things you love about your city? They give us a list of 3 things: walking my dog in the bayou, eating at this restaurant, listening to music at this club. And we're producing these huge print ads to kind of show this is a trans woman who lives in Houston, and she's your neighbor. You walk past Victoria, you would never know she was a trans person because she's not a caricature, she's a human being. So we started doing these photos, which are pretty great, and there's a couple of them, because we want to make sure that we are helping to establish a really positive mental template for what it means to be trans in Houston. And to give people the ability to relate to a person on something other than a bathroom ad. Like Victoria, she's an artist, she likes to, this one's Ashley actually, this is Ashley. Ashley is an artist. Ashley eats at very specific restaurants, she walks her dog on the bayou. It's stuff that normal people like Joe Schmo, who doesn't know what a trans person is or he thinks it's RuPaul, can relate to. It makes her more human in his eyes. It helps build a mental template that we hope will be able to undo some of the damage that was done during the Hero fight. A lot of the aspects of what we're doing here were similar to what was done in DC in 2012. They had a trans respect campaign when the city included trans protections in the non-discrimination law. So as part of a public education push, they started doing a similar campaign as this, just to really get the word out about inclusion of trans folks in non-discrimination laws. Hopefully one day we'll be including trans folks in our non-discrimination laws, but in the meantime, we're going to keep doing what we can to raise visibility. And that I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
So this will be pretty quick for me, but I just wanted to share some of the things we're thinking about sort of movement-wide right now in terms of what needs to be happening to advance local non-discrimination ordinances. And so we're really working with national organizations and partners to find and test more effective messages. We know that some messages work a lot better than others, but we do not have sort of the magic bullet for addressing this bathroom argument from the opposition. So we need to keep doing the research, with polling focus groups, but also really doing the testing in the field to see what actually works to inoculate and to bring people back when they've been exposed to some of these messages from the opposition. We need to test some of this in smaller markets first. Running a campaign in the 5th or 4th largest city in the United States, like Houston, is incredibly expensive. And so as we're trying to figure out how do we do this better, how do we do this well, now that the opposition has really honed in on this really effective for them message, we need to do some testing in smaller places as much as we can. So we can learn lessons without tapping too much of our resources as a movement. We need to test those persuasion and inoculation tactics. Building on the kind of canvassing, the deep canvassing where you're having 10, 15, 20-minute conversations with people at the door about trans people, about LGBT people more broadly. We need to test whether that works in a campaign context, when you're in the heat of the battle as opposed to sort of ongoing public education work. And then finally, we really need to figure out how to build a national public education campaign. Freedom to Marry did a lot of effective work along with other national partners in really raising awareness and getting the American public to understand marriage as an issue without it being tied necessarily to any one particular legislative campaign in a particular state. And what that did is it laid that foundation all across the country. We need to find ways to do that, to get that narrative out there nationally, so we're prepared for these state and local campaigns when they come up. So these are all of the things that we're trying to think about as a movement at the national level that we can do to make it easier for everyone in this room when we're trying to do something in our own communities to be more effective. And I'll hand it over to Katie.
All right, so we've talked a lot about Houston and more broadly about sort of, you know, the landscape, what are the laws, what states have protections, things like that. I want to talk a little bit now about what is actually happening around the country. So I've got a slide here that's going to highlight a couple, not all. This is not an exhaustive list of all of the campaigns because there's a lot of activity all over the place. But I wanted to highlight 3 things that happened this week, 3 from last week and 3 earlier this month, to really give you a sense of what's going on in the country around non-discrimination and religious refusal bills. So in Georgia this week, there was a license to discriminate bill. We already talked about the NFL coming out in support of that. I'm sorry, against that, in support of LGBT people. Thank you, NFL. But so that was a big development with the bill, and also a big development in terms of public support for the LGBT community. Kentucky advanced a religious refusal bill, which is now out of the Senate and into the House. So a lot of quick movement happening in Kentucky. Tennessee has a gender check bill for students. Has anyone heard about these student bills that are going on? We're starting to call them more of a gender check bill instead of a bathroom bill, because usually the biggest gap in these bills is that it doesn't really clearly articulate how you identify who is transgender or not transgender when they're going into a bathroom at a school. Sometimes they talk about chromosomes. I think in South Dakota they actually called it a visual accounting, which I think we can all figure out what a visual accounting would be when a student's trying to use the bathroom. So Tennessee had one of those introduced, but those bills, by the way, also defy federal law. So that's important to understand. And then last week, Missouri, with their 40-hour filibuster against the constitutional amendment, it did pass the Senate, and it's coming up before the House, so we're definitely monitoring that situation. Virginia just passed a First Amendment Defense Act that codifies anti-LGBT discrimination. The governor has threatened to veto it, and we're just waiting on that. And then Oklahoma killed 27 bad bills. So that's huge. So it's not all bad. There were bad bills, but it didn't end badly. It's all about how you define success, right? That's one of my big takeaways. How are you defining success today? Killing 27 bad bills is a huge success right now.
With no staff.
With
One staff.
With one staff, yes, there you go. And then earlier this month, opponents in Washington State filed papers to put an anti-transgender ballot initiative on the ballot. So folks are gearing up for a campaign there. So Washington State, we might be seeing some action. And then South Dakota, Republican governor vetoed their transgender pupil genital check bill. And then a religious refusal bill died in West Virginia earlier this month. So we've prevented some bad things are still moving forward. There are proactive campaigns out there, but right now some of this defensive stuff is definitely at the forefront of this work. But I just wanted to share so you have sort of a snapshot of what's going on all around the country with some of the things that have happened most recently. So what can we do about this? We've got these recommendations. Some of these recommendations, these are coming from Freedom for All Americans commissioned a study that's a complementary study to what the Federation did with the 5 cities. We focused solely on Houston and are lifting up some recommendations. If you're seeing things that are repeating on here, we actually talked about, do we want to repeat or not? We decided to repeat because we thought it was really important that you've got a state ACLU affiliate, you've got the strategic partner to statewide LGBT advocacy groups, and you have the National Non-Discrimination Campaign, all in a room together saying the exact same thing, which is huge progress, and a huge thing, right? Like, wow. But it means that these things that are repeating are really important. They're really important. So engaging trans staff and leaders, targeting your battles carefully, building your broad coalitions, launching your public education, preparing for the ballot. Those are all really, really important. I won't belabor that point any longer. So I can give you my shameless plug. So my biggest focus at Freedom for All Americans is running a program called LGBT University. And LGBT University is focused on the fact that our campaigns are only as strong as the people who are doing the work, right? And it's not just about our coalitions, it's also about our staff, it's also about our volunteers, it's about the actual human beings who are doing this work. And one of the things I was really excited about when I joined Freedom for All Americans was that this was an organization that really wanted to invest heavily in individual leadership development, in helping our campaigns have the most effective leaders possible to do this work. So what we do through LGBT University, you're actually at one of the things that I do, which is work with partners to make sure that we're providing training content that's really meaningful and important for people who are doing this work on the ground. But I also run an apprenticeship program, which is a year-long program for folks who want to actually work on non-discrimination campaigns, particularly in a staff capacity, folks who want to be a campaign manager or be a leader in those campaigns. I work with a cohort of people over the course of a year and bring other movement organizations and leaders together to provide training curriculum so that we can have the best staff on the ground possible for leading these campaign efforts. And also making sure that we're developing a pipeline of leaders who also better represent the actual LGBT community, right? Making sure that we do have trans people who can be campaign managers, making sure that we are recruiting people of color, making sure that we're being really intentional about who's leading our work. So, applications for our next cohort will open up this summer. If that's something that you think you'd be really interested in, please come and talk to me. That program actually is all expenses paid. So we cover all travel and lodging and provide scholarships for folks to participate. So that is my shameless plug, I'm done. And now we will go into questions, Q&A. Does anyone have any questions for us?
You just answered my question.
Great. I don't know which one I answered, but I'm glad I did.
What kind of experience do you have to qualify for the LGBTQ thing?
Okay,
Like,
so
what kind of background and stuff?
So there's an application process for it, but I will tell you there's not one specific background that I'm looking for. Our cohorts have brought together people who are currently working on non-discrimination campaigns, people who aren't, people who are working in the movement, people who aren't, people who are working on political campaigns, people who aren't. Really what I'm looking for are people who have the leadership capacity and the potential to be effective, and with some really intensive training over the course of a year, who could be ready to be campaign managers or campaign leaders. So there's not one profile I look for. It's case by case. I do interviews with people to make sure that we're also going to get the best cohort. Do you have a question or are you stretching?
Both. So, this may be a stupid question, but.
No stupid question.
So, on community college campuses, for example, if there's a local ordinance passed around anti-discrimination, are there like protections on campus? Because I know on universities and college campuses there are anti-discrimination attached to like if you receive federal funding and stuff like that. I don't know, so I'm kind of confused. But
Sure. Anyone else want to make this one?
Sorry, just to clarify, are you asking if a non-discrimination ordinance passes in a city, does it apply at the community college?
Yeah, or it applies, right? Because it applies everywhere, right? But I'm saying, like, is there like another set of, like, is that like
Right.
helpful on a college campus? Does that provide
Yes.
protection?
Yeah, I'm actually working with Lone Star Community College System in the Houston area to get an ordinance that's specific to that community college. And that's still useful because there's like here at AV Tech, I know there's a lot of people who go here and I'm sure there's a large percentage of those people that are queer or a person of color or someone of faith who could use a non-discrimination ordinance. So I think it's super useful to go and look at the policy on the books in your school and figure out who you would go ask to change that. I think in some places it would be really easy, and in some places it would be really hard. And I also encourage people, if they have any questions about how to work with like middle school and high school youth at this at independent school districts. I'm doing a lot of work right now in the suburbs of Houston, making sure that Fort Bend ISD and Cy-Fair ISD, places that don't have as progressive policies, change that at the school board level.
I'll just add something.
Mm-hmm.
I think it may depend whether the city ordinance would affect the community colleges. Since community colleges are a state government entity, they may not be subject to local ordinances depending on sort of how your state is structured. So that's something you might want to check out. But you can get policies passed at the community college level for sure.
Any other questions? Yep.
So Charlotte recently passed a non-discrimination ordinance, but the state of North Carolina is wanting to like invalidate it. If that happens, what do we do after that?
I will let our resident North Carolinian answer.
Great question. So yeah, the state legislature is potentially going to pass some sort of law that would preempt either a part or all of the non-discrimination ordinance in Charlotte. And if they do that, it would probably apply statewide.